So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my research for this was, I believe, the 2019 season. So what I did very generally is I went around to a whole bunch of tall grass and hill prairies, and I looked at Dahlia purpurea, so purple prairie clover. I looked at various floral traits. I looked at habitat area, and I looked at how these things can work in tandem to possibly impact pollinators. All right, so I'm going to give you a quick background as to why maybe the tall grass or the hill prairies could be different. So between tall grass and hill prairies, they have different soil makeup and nutrient amounts. And so just based on the abiotic components in the environment, we know that plants can grow differently. All right. And whenever we consider biotic components in an environment as well, that can really compound how plants are able to grow. Biotic being fungi and microbes. Okay. And if plants are growing differently between, say, a tall grass and a hill prairie, which we can show have different levels of, say, clay and nitrogen and things like that available to plants, then it's reasonable to think that maybe that's going to impact pollinators. And so other studies have shown that plants growing in various environments can have differing amounts of, in this case, herbivory that occurred on the plants. And so ultimately, we can see this multi-tier level of interactions where abiotic and biotic components of the environment affect plant growth, and that could possibly impact pollinators. And so that is a very general breakdown of what the background is for my research. And so I had a couple hypotheses here. The first one is that the plants are just going to grow differently. So the floral displays between the tall grass and the hill prairies are going to just be different. And the pollinators then that visit will be different as well. Okay, and so to do this, how I did my research is I went to 7 different sites, 3 tall grass and 4 hill prairies. I had 4 and 4, however, I had some tall grass prairies that didn't produce enough purple prairie clover, and so I wasn't able to use those. So I then went to the sites multiple times. I looked and I surveyed about more or less 10 plants a visit to each site, and I got 40 individual plants. And on those plants, they had a variety of growth measures that I'd done. And I also completed a pollinator survey. So the plant measurements that I took was the height of the plant, the number of flowering stems from the base of the plant, the total number of inflorescence, so one of the flowering heads, and I took measures of 3 of those inflorescence of the total portion and the blooming portion to see if that had any impact on pollinator attractiveness. I then did 15-minute focal plant, so at 1 plant at a time survey, where I identified all bumblebees just on the whim, and all solitary bees I attempted to capture. I preserved them and then I identified them later. Okay, so my results can be a bit confusing because I ended up doing a MANOVA, so that's a multiple response analysis. But very generally, I can show you some graphs to show you what these things look like. And essentially, between the height of the tall grass and the hill prairies, we see that, yeah, the tall grass prairie plant of purple prairie clover is indeed taller than the hill prairies. Okay, whenever we look at the total number of stems, there's actually not a difference between the total number of stems between the tall grass and the hill prairies. And lastly, the inflorescence size This is actually a little bit different of a measure. This is looking at the total floral display here. And so what we see is that this is pretty marginal. This is really close to being significant between the two types of prairie. And so there's almost an effect on these, on the different prairie types impacting that could just in growth, and we'll see here in a moment on the impact on pollinators. So looking across my sites, here's a breakdown from my 7 sites on diversity and evenness, but then also on the total number of bees that I saw, and lastly, the total number of genuses that I had at each of the sites. So this is a regression. So it's a linear line going through look of the data, looking at the display size and the bee total. And so the display size is going to be a value created from the total number of inflorescence in bloom and the average size of the portion blooming. Okay, so that is a very accurate, or as close to the accurate representation as I can get for the display effect that a single plant may have. Okay, and so for hill prairies, what we see is a gentle trend, and the more display size, or the larger the display size, more visitors will occur. And in the tallgrass prairie, we see a very similar trend. However, it's just a little bit more evident and stronger in that relationship. Okay, so just to wrap up here, conclusions to summarize is the plants in the tallgrass prairies were indeed taller. The plants did not differ in their total number of stems between the prairie types, but the plants in tallgrass prairies seem to have a little bit larger floral displays, and that can come back to the total number of inflorescence. So although they may have a similar number of main stems, there could be more side shoot stems coming off, causing inflorescence. I observed 524 bees comprised of 14 genuses and many species. I also show that floral displays between the prairie types follow a similar trend, although it is slightly stronger for tallgrass prairies for the floral display to impact pollinator visitation. And lastly, just thanks to the Illinois Native Plant Society.